Okay. Okay. Anyways, coming back to it, was that we were sort of going around with this idea for things that is constantly changing, which is amazing. We realized before when we had this conversation that what we think now,
as things started to evolve and unfold between Cal and myself, we started to understand things from a different perspective. And so then as Cal was putting out content around that, he kind of was like, people were like, you're changing your perspective. And I think from what I observed from my thing, it was like, because I was also a part of the unfolding, I was like, it's not that we're changing our perspective, it's that what's happening and the knowledge that's coming in as it's unfolding really does shift you.
Yeah, one second. Sorry.
What you think and what you want to say and want to share. And I think the beautiful thing about like Cal and probably what Ronni and I have been inspired about.
Yeah. And like, do you mind if I go into a little bit of that?
Yeah, sure. Go into the details. So we haven't, sorry, I'll just pause there and say, there will be an episode where Cal and I like discuss our story probably in more depth, but it's fun to talk about it now, but Ronni and I tried to record an episode about it and we ended up not posting it because I was all over the place because I was just so excited. So we haven't delved into the relationship stuff yet, but we will eventually. But I will just say that the masculine that I was talking about in the previous episode is now my partner. Yeah. So sorry, you can carry on.
Yeah. So I have been out of the spiritual community, as I said, for like 5 years, 5-6 years. So I was thrown back into the now spiritual community just by sort of following and being like, what's all this about? Mind you, I'd only watched like one video that went viral. And the defensiveness of people over relationship dynamics, being twin flames, soulmates, karmic partners, whatever, and all the labeling and all the, you're leading people down misinformation, and all of these sort of like very big projections came up. And I'm not someone who often places myself in that. I don't really comment. I'm not really fazed by any of it. And I found myself actually speaking from a very grounded point of view, validating that there's a lot of commenters on there that were hurt, feeling a bit betrayed, all the things. But I didn't know Cal. I hadn't watched any of the videos previously. I didn't really know anything. So that gave me a really calm perspective to actually view the divine orchestration. Hang on one sec. He's pulled the book on him.
Yeah, just to touch, because obviously Ronni is like a very close friend of mine. I had shared a lot of what was going on behind the scenes with Ronni, but I hadn't necessarily, Ronni was one of the few people I had talked to about what was going on. And so she had like insight knowledge in that sense, but she was not like aware of the place and the background, I guess you could say, of Cal's position in so-called community, or like, because Cal is a creator who just shares what their truth is. And you can carry on.
No, and I think that's what inspired me, was because I had no idea. Like I haven't been in the community because I left a little bit salty.
Which we've
because
talked about a lot over the last 6 months, you and I.
yeah, like my view on, I don't know, twin flames, divine counterparts, soulmates, all that stuff, it changed over many years of like inner work and, you know, trying to take away the labels. And like I am with a really divine counterpart soulmate who came in for me really when I stepped away from spirituality for a while there. And it was funny because I was at the peak of my internal evolution, and really manifesting and really getting specific, and really working on my credentials and my healing and my nervous system. So I was spiritually getting very advanced, but I just took myself away from that community, which propelled me more, I think.
Yeah. Well, then you trust your own voice more than anyone else's.
Yeah, which wasn't really emphasized in the community back then. It was very much rely on me. I am going to help you. Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah. The amount of money I spent on tarot readings.
Yeah.
When I can read myself, I just...
Yeah. I don't do them anymore because of where I've got to. I realized that my place and my calling is to help people actually work through their shit. Yeah. And I think what I see a lot of in the spiritual community is like, let's get all down and nutty into the nuts and bolts of your fucking astrology and your, not astrology, your birth chart, and like, and your which crystal is going to be best for this, and what's the word that I'm looking of? Just all the different aspects that can come with like going like down little rabbit holes and like needing tarot cards and readings to tell you what to do, when really I feel my place in this earth now is to help people to tune in to know what to do, because they trust their inner guidance and they have that connection with self, because self is God.
Yeah.
And I think like what I saw and why I also got uncomfortable with the community was because a lot of my experience with religion, I was seeing played out in the spiritual community of, you know, this really fueled polarity between right and wrong, and this really fueled judgment from people's varying opinions, and failing to realize the fact that everyone has been called here to do a different job. Everyone has a different set of experiences. Everyone has a different set of giftings. And so we can't sit there and say that that's wrong for you and this is right for you and you should be with this soulmate and you shouldn't be with that soulmate, because we don't know what each person's soul blueprint is. Only the person themselves knows, right? And so what I realized was that I just became really uncomfortable with doing tarot readings. What I used them for initially when I started doing them back again last year was that I found that it was a good way for me to start re-trusting my intuition and my ability to channel. And now I don't use tarot cards at all, and I can channel the messages myself. And even so, when I channel, I never tell people what to do anymore. People will ask me, like, should I leave my partner, or what about this, or what about that? And I teach them the techniques of how to find the answer within themselves, because I don't think it's my call to make.
And that's the thing, is that we give away accountability when we do that. Like, could you imagine the backlash of you telling someone, yeah, you need to leave this partner? Like, ethically, that's wrong. But like, especially if you were in America, you could get sued. Like, they would take your whole business. They will take your whole home. Like, this person told me, like, you have to be so careful with what we're putting out, and what we're willing to have as healthy boundaries as practitioners and facilitators and things like that, because I get what you mean. Like I have been an incredible reader for some of the most spiritual people in the country. Like I have a lot of networking and a lot of friends, very close friends, who trusted me with very, very deep stuff.
Mm.
And I still chose to walk away, not because I know it's not helpful. It is, it definitely is. But I was still learning my own credentials and learning my own power. And if I'd stayed there, I wouldn't have learned about breath work. I wouldn't have learned about cold therapy and nervous system regulation. I wouldn't have been able to actually get to the embodiment part of myself, which is now going to help thousands, hundreds of thousands of other people, if I just stayed there and been like, oh, this is quite nice. This is quite validating. Like, I know my shit. But it was never about that. It was me learning.
Yeah, but also the higher purpose and higher calling of your mission in life.
Yeah.
And so like where you're at now is in a totally different space, and the same with where I'm at. And I think the other thing I wanted to say was that I remember a lot when I was transitioning out of readings into coursework and helping women to reach inner union, because that's my focus at the moment, is helping women to reach inner union, and that's like through various different ways. And like if people are interested, they can check out my website. But I think what I realized was that I didn't want to give my power away to anyone. So why was I then allowing others to give their power away to me?
Exactly.
And I also just, really felt strongly that we want to cultivate a community where we respect people's inner guidance and we respect their inner judgment, and that there is no one person at the top, and there is no one spiritual being that's better than the other. Because if we go with the idea that collectively we are a collective consciousness and collectively we are the embodiment of God, then like there should be no one at the top. Sure, there's like people that have more leadership skills than others, and there's some that, fit down in different roles. But I think like as a society, we have to be moving forward, we have to be really careful about not allowing people to take away our power.
Putting them on that pedestal.
Yeah.
It's been an interesting learning curve. Because as divine feminines, we're wanting to nurture and we're wanting to help people, and it's really interesting, I think, the different evolutions that you'll go through with the awakening, with sort of like where you fit in this new society now. Society's changing, where do I fit into this? And it's constant, like we're always developing.
And I think life is always changing and unfolding. And like I remember it literally was a few months ago, you were saying to me, like, I feel like I've lost my spirituality. And I remember saying to you, I don't think you've lost your spirituality. I think you're in a different phase of spirituality. You're in the phase of like giving birth and raising children and holding that space and that ability for them to be safe and nurtured. And that is where you're channeling all of your energy and your focus. It doesn't mean that you've lost that spirituality. And I think that again reflects on the view that we put on ourselves, because of what we're seeing out in the community of spiritual people is like they have to be these badass women that like bring in so many thousands a month, and they have to be these badass women that can do it all. And the reality is, like, with spirituality, it's a relationship with the self, and the relationship with the self allows us to relate with each other. And so it was kind of like the realization I had one day when I was doing a reading was that because someone asked me, like, what do your guides sound like? And I was like, I don't have guides.
They sound like my internal voice.
Yeah, I don't have guides. And then
Yeah.
they were like, so who are you talking to? And I was like, your higher self. And then they were like, how do you do that? And I was like, well, you could do it too. That's the thing. Like, you just need to train yourself to do it. And so that's kind of when I picked up that, oh, duh. Like, I just need to help people be able to tune into themselves, because we are so bombarded with like social media, information, noise, like overstimulation, like the rush of life, that the internal voice of your inner guidance, which some would say guides, is like numbed. And it's like, I feel like a lot of your job and my job is to reawaken that. And I also became really clear in my purpose that I don't want, and we talked about this the other day, about that, I don't want people to think that they're on this like lifelong healing journey. Because like, I feel like sometimes have you ever met that person that like thinks that their whole identity is that they are healing and they're on this healing journey? And I realized that is not, like, we don't need that identity either, because if we go with the collective consciousness idea of I am, and I am God, and I am, then we're never needing to heal. We're just needing to release things and to allow things and traumas to process. But we already are divine and we already are whole. And I think the idea of like being on this healing journey, it kind of puts the perspective of you're broken and you need fixing. And that's like a very patriarchal Christian kind of way of looking at it. And I think that's maybe where the community gets misguided, is that they're focusing on the fact that people are so broken and they just don't see their trauma and they just don't see their shit. And if you just worked on your like anxious attachment, then you would be like so much more spiritual. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I know exactly what you're saying, because that was my identity. I'm not afraid to admit that there was a fair few years.
Like, that's how I
where you're looping. You're like, oh, I've looked at this, but now I'm triggered, so I'm going to re-look at it deeper, and I'm going to look at it from a different perspective, and I'm going to look at it from this and this. And I think once you start to build that confidence, which a lot of women and like the divine feminine aspect of us does lack, that confidence of being okay with themselves and understanding that we will be reflected on, we'll get lots of projections, we're going to get pushback. And instead of immediately saying, oh, this must be something I need to work on, this is definitely mine, you actually get to a place of saying, this isn't actually mine. I can feel it in my body. Oh yeah, maybe I should look at this part. Maybe this person might have been correct about this specific thing. However, for the most part, this actually isn't mine, and you can give it back with love. I personally give it back to the earth with love, because I don't really just want to send back everything to people. But there has been a few times where you'll say something that will absolutely trigger that person. You're not intending it, you're just being authentically you. And they send some pretty nasty vibes your way. And it used to really affect me. Like, I would cry for days and like be depressed and like really struggle to differentiate between what's mine and what's someone else's. And now I just have to tune into my body one time, maybe 5 minutes, have a quick cleanse, be very intentional with it. But for the most part now, I just want other people to recognize their own inner power, because it doesn't have to be constantly working on ourselves. Like,
because that's exhausting. And something I was talking with Cal, and I've talked about with you, was when I was kind of reawoken, I thought, oh, maybe I'll go down the Akashic Records pathway. And I think I talked to you as well. I was like,
Yeah.
because I knew that there was some ancestral stuff that I had to clear, right? And I knew that there was a whole lot of stuff that I had been called to come and clear in my family constellation.
Yes.
And so I asked you, like, do you have anyone you trust? Because obviously you knew my background of like kind of exiting the spiritual world and then like coming back into it, but like from a more grounded perspective and like a very authentic self perspective. And you kind of, I think you kind of just gave me a like neutral answer of like, oh, maybe kind of, no, I don't know. And then I was like, I didn't really like resonate with what you said about who you suggested. I was like, I was kind of neutral about it as well. And then it was like 2 days later, I had this like realization, we're not supposed to go down that route. Like we're not supposed to go delving into the Akashics. We're not supposed, this is my personal perspective, okay? And I know that people do it, and I know that people resonate with that, and it's been really helpful and healing for them. And so I don't, if people want to do it, all power to them, but this is just my perspective. By going and delving into that, like we're not supposed to remember. And by remembering it, we're bringing it into our conscious state of awareness that then we're just looping again and again and again and again. So when you go and you same context, I feel, applies to the healing journey of like, I've got this mother wound, right?
Yeah.
And hang on, let me just rewind a bit. So like I understand, like for me, there were some wounds I needed to like release and allow to come out and heal. But I knew that once they were done, they were done. And I wasn't going to revisit them. And there may be times when like things might come up again and I'll go, oh, I know what that is, and move on. And not be upset over the fact of like, why am I re-triggered? It's just like, that's come up, release, okay, moving on. And that has taught me to transmute incredibly fast the energy. And I think my biggest learning recently, well, not my biggest, but a big learning recently has been that we can do all of that ourselves without needing to delve into arenas of stuff that will keep us in the loop of I need to go to this reader to get the information. I need to do a past life regression to get the results. And do you want to speak into the results?
Yes. So there's a couple of things there. The first one, I'm a hypnotherapist, right? So I do and have done past life regressions. We're taught it as part of like our credentials, but just because we need to know how to do it safely, right? Now, I often will not do them, even if they're on offer. I very specifically will do it with certain people that I know they need that information for that specific reason. But with hypnotherapy, we actually have a lot of rules and regulations. And one of them is once you clear something, you do not mention it again. So if someone's come in for like a parts therapy where there's a part of their body that wants this and this and this, and they can't make decisions and things like that, once the decision has been made in that hypnotherapy session, we don't touch it again. We do not open the box. It is for their own mental health and safety, but it's also for the practitioners. So it's a very much like learned skill. There's quite a lot to it that people don't understand. And that goes pretty deep. But the second thing, which is just as important in hypnotherapy, but I have personally learned this through breath work and retreats and things like that, was integration is so important. It can take weeks, months even. Once you've opened up something, some type of trauma, and that person has gone back to their life, it cannot surface again for a wee while. But when it does, And when it does slowly get integrated into that embodiment, there is a lot of changes that are from, like, the mental and emotional state, but also your physical body will like process it. And we need to be really careful when we put a timeline on something, like, come and do this session with me and like you're healed. It doesn't really work like that, unfortunately. And so we can get caught up in the ego of trying to just heal the thing, instead of allowing it to just land and ground and take its time, because you will change. Like, the decision to go to that practitioner or to do that session or to get that specific healing or whatever, that is the like masculine action part. But then the integration of that feminine part takes quite a lot longer. And when we're doing and doing and doing and doing, you might not feel those effects for 6, 7, 8 months before you even get the seed that you planted. So then you're overwhelming your system a year, 2 years, 3 years later, not realizing that that was all from, those 3 months of really hard work that you did took 3 years. So yeah.
As you're talking, I'm reminded that one of the hermetic principles that I'm teaching at the moment in the Inner Union course is everything is a vibration and everything is always moving in constant motion. Everything's in constant motion. And so when we understand and embrace that and know what that means, right? It's like if everything's in constant motion already and then you keep like re-vibrating the motion, you're basically like sending tsunamis through your system continuously. And then I feel like that's where it becomes very dangerous in like retreats and things if they're not done with the right level of integration or with the right level of support going forward. Because you're essentially set off everything in motion, and then that person carries on with their life in their own flow. And how do you know that you haven't opened like Pandora's box and left that person to go home and be haunted, kind of thing? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's so I guess
the learning thing.
I guess to speak into that is like maybe we could talk a little bit about like what healthy, because I guess what like healthy integration. So when we're doing therapies and when we're doing sessions and stuff, what healthy integration looks like. And so for me, on a recent retreat that I did with Tariana, and it was called Legacy of Light. It was a 3-day retreat. We spent 3/4 of the last day was all about integration. And it was kind of like once we had sealed off like the family constellations and stuff and sealed off the inner child work, okay, we didn't like touch that again. But what we did do was take what we had learned from those sessions and looked at, okay, where is it, what, like kind of like an action plan, right? Of like, okay, where could this come up for you in your life again? And what's your ABC of what you want to do when that comes up? So it's kind of like a safety plan, I guess. And it's incredible because the participants found that was like one of their favorite parts, and they got so much from that bulk of the retreat. And their integration has been, from what I understand from me checking in with them and stuff, has been quite smooth. Because we set up this safety net of how to proceed through it safely, as well as like reminding them of what you and I were just talking about, that you've been through a lot, you've processed a lot. Allow it to settle. Just go back to kind of your muggle life.
Pretty much. And like, I love that.
And basically then just like follow up with calls and check-ins of like, how are you going? What's happening for you? And even for myself, I wasn't a participant of the full modalities on the retreat, but even then I participated in some stuff, and I still had integration when I came home. Like I had to take 3 days to just actually start processing it and allowing it to unfold, and stuff really came up, like big stuff that again, I don't want to go into detail, but stuff that came up was like some of the biggest stuff I have ever had come up. And I have the tools to deal with it, and I know how to deal with it, but I'm just pushed back to that reflection of like, God, what if it wasn't me and that stuff was coming up?
It's big.
And I also think the other thing on that note is what I've been learning in my journey of like being more conscious is, or being more understanding of who I am and where I fit in the world, is that it doesn't always have to be how I think it's gonna look, and just really like embracing how it unfolds. Because my week last week after the retreat did not go anything like the way I thought it would go.
Yeah.
And it's been a freaking beautiful week, but it was like, damn, it was like thing after thing after thing after thing. You know
Which
what I'm saying?
told you. You were like, I'm just
too.
going to take a day and then we can record. And I was like,
yeah, you did tell
okay.
me. It's also like how I told you, oh no, what do you mean you're not supposed to be with your twin flame? You just need to do more inner work.
It's true. She
then
told me this.
What happens?
And I was like, you just wait, girl.
And
I did it with grace. I didn't say that. I just was like, okay, very neutral.
No, you were very graceful. I was not so graceful. I came in like a fucking 4-wheel drive. And I think the other thing, Ronni, that I wanted to talk about was about I guess that whole point of like, again, that's a beautiful reflection of what everything we've been talking about is like where you are at in your journey and where I'm at in my journey is like, it's very similar, but also very different. And so it's understanding that with each other. And I think that's something you do incredibly well, is you are able to sit back and go like, oh, I see where you're at. That's cool. Like, and there's no judgment, and there's no, you're just able to hold space for where that person's at. And I think that's a really beautiful thing. And I think people can learn a lot from you in that sense.
Thanks.
But it's the same as when you said to me when I told you about Cal, and you were like, just be prepared, it's going to move really fast because you had been through this before. And I was like, ugh, that's just you. It won't be like that for me. Moving fast.
Yeah. And it was very beautiful because you took it on the chin so well as well. Like you can tell someone, and this is where I think a lot of us might be led slightly off our path, is like you can tell someone, but we learn the best through experience. So, it's allowing people that space. And that's kind of what the feminine is about. Like we don't, we can tell our kids like, use your manners, wash your hands after the toilet, like don't eat that plant, whatever. But quite often it's the actual giving them space to figure it out and, sense those consequences and be in a safe space that, the consequences, like, they're not going to go and eat a poison berry or anything, but they're probably going to go and eat a leaf, like we're giving them that safe space. And I think this is where motherhood comes in with spirituality, and especially not just like motherhood in the way, it's also womanhood in general, of the divine feminine. We do have a different perspective. We do have a different threshold. of holding people. And that is what's honestly, I think, missing a lot in the community.
The divine feminine holding. Yeah.
Like, and the natural, and I'm not saying that anyone that isn't a mother isn't, because that's not the point. I just think we've misaligned a little bit of our honor of mothers and motherhood, and whether, you could be a pet mum, this isn't just you birthing babies, but there's a big gap in the community of nurturing divine feminine energy, because a lot of these influencers and coaches and mentors, they don't have kids, because they went down the very masculine, I'm going to be a coach, this is my business, this is my career, which is amazing. I love that. But there's a very small percentage that are mothers, because we haven't had the time necessarily to put into our businesses yet. We haven't had that alignment yet, but it's now very prominent. It's becoming a very new thing moving forward, I think.
And I think that's where, like, as friends and in friendships, is like when it's beautiful to have people around you that remind you, as mothers.
Yeah.
I was really quite strong with you about the fact that, like, you are doing the spiritual work. Stop telling yourself you're not. Like, because I felt like we send ourselves down this route of, like, I'm not doing enough. I'm not doing enough. And again, I'm going back to the I am consciousness. If we embrace that, it's like you are enough, because you are God and we all are interconnected. And so, like, there just doesn't need to be the judgment of self when you understand who you are and why you're so significant.
Yeah, I feel that. Yeah, that's pretty much, like, I feel like we've covered so much, but like we haven't been, we're just chit-chatting, like we just a little hangout.
You know what? Oh, I'll tell you something funny that Cal said to me the other night. We were on the phone and he goes, I was like doing what you and I were just doing, right? And he goes, baby, I love you, but that just goes like blah, 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 blah. He's like, just save that conversation for Ronni and your girlfriends, because, like, to a masculine, that's like...
It's so true, though.
Yeah. And I was like, well, at least you tell me now and not like a year down the track when I've been doing it for a year. Like, and I guess that's, again, all about, like, laying the foundational work. Is like, we want to lay that foundational work for people in their healing journey to set them up to succeed. And I think that that's really from that feminine aspect that you're talking about, is setting them up to succeed by holding that feminine space of not needing the results now. We're just and I loved your parallel, by the way, of motherhood. Is like, you're setting up the framework for your children to succeed and for your children to unfold into something beautiful. And that's kind of the space that you and I are coming from now in our work, right?
Yeah. And so I'm happy if people did get this far again, because our chats can go kind of all over the show, because we just get inspired by what we're saying.
But again, we're just channeling that inner voice, right?
Yes.
It's authentic to us. And sorry, I wanted to ask you if people wanted to look at your books, because you have done so much research and it's sciencey, and you talked about your sciencey stuff last time and I didn't interrupt you, but I just wanted to talk about where people can get your books and what they are.
Yes. So I currently have, I think 4, maybe 5, I'm not sure, ebooks, which are on my Shopify. There's a link in my social medias, which we can probably link below anyway. But so I've done quite extensive research as I'm doing my master's in rehabilitation. So there is a manifestation ebook, which is sort of about the beginning stages, I guess, of manifestation, very human practical things. And then cold therapy and contrast therapy, which is just amazing, especially for practitioners, to know what level of heat and cold exposure, what time, and for what reasons. Like sometimes it's for relaxation, so there's a very specific protocol for these things, and then there's healing and things like that. And then I do have a postpartum one because obviously I had a baby recently, and I'm about to have another baby, which has like free 7-day meal plans to help with things like magnesium for mum and B12 and things that are really important whether you breastfeed or not. There is a lot of science behind the need for these. And it's not just, the mainstream, like, have your iron. So there is specific like meal plans and just making sure that we make sure mum makes time for herself and things like that in those early postpartum stages. And then
no remedy for a crying baby though, right?
No, that's out of my league. Unfortunately. But there is things like I personally did use some red light therapy to help my baby know the difference between day and night and like wake times, and it worked amazing. But he just wasn't a very good sleeper in general. But that's okay. And then my last one that I'm off the top of my head is the breath work, which again, really good if you want to do it yourself, but also really good for practitioners because there's so many different forms of breath and we're not always well versed in all the options. We go for our one that we're really good at, like, I don't know, maybe Wim Hof, right? Because we've been exposed to it. But there's so many other forms of breathing that can help from kids through to adults and all the things. So very sciencey, peer-reviewed research-based ebooks, if anyone's interested.
Very grounded perspective, and thanks for sharing.
Yay!
And I'm sure we'll be back soon with another one.
Yes.
All right. Thank you for watching. You can, to make sure you don't miss any future ones, you can subscribe, or if you have any questions and things that you want us to maybe talk about in future episodes, please do post a comment and we will go from there. Thank you. Bye. That was really fucking good.
We're still recorded.